Sometimes, the biggest moments in our lives begin with a question we can't answer. When one morning started with Ethan waking up in his soccer captain Logan's hoodie with no memory of how it happened, he had no idea that one missing night would uncover feelings neither of them had been ready to face.
If you ever wake up wearing your soccer captain's hoodie, don't ask where it came from unless you're ready to hear the truth. That was the sentence someone had written across the whiteboard in our locker room the morning my entire life quietly changed. First, I thought it was another prank. The Westbrook University Wolves had a tradition of leaving ridiculous messages before away games, and our captain, Logan Carter, usually erased them before coach arrived. But that morning, nobody laughed. Every conversation stopped the second I walked through the door. Every pair of eyes landed on me, then drifted away just as quickly. I looked down and felt my stomach tighten. I wasn't wearing my own gray sweatshirt. I was wearing Logan Carter's Navy team hoodie, the one with the gold captain's crest stitched over the heart and his last name embroidered across the sleeve. It was at least one size too big, the cuffs covering half my hands. I had no memory of putting it on. My last clear memory was celebrating after our rivalry game, grabbing pizza with a few teammates, and stepping outside into the cool October air. After that, everything dissolved into scattered flashes that refused to connect. Rain tapping against pavement, bright stadium lights reflected in puddles, someone calling my name from far away, and the comforting weight of a hoodie settling over my shoulders. "Morning," Logan said as he walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee like nothing unusual had happened. He looked exactly as he always did, calm, focused, impossible to read. His dark blonde hair was still damp from an early workout, and every freshman on the team straightened the moment he entered the room. I pulled at the sleeve. "Why am I wearing your hoodie?" His expression barely changed. For one long second, I thought he was actually going to answer. Instead, he placed 1 coffee on the bench beside me and quietly said, "Don't worry about it." "Don't worry about it?" I repeated. "Logan, I don't even remember getting home." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I know." "Then tell me what happened." He looked directly into my eyes for the first time that morning, and whatever he saw made him hesitate. "Not today." Before I could stop him, he turned and walked toward Coach's office. Around me, lockers slammed shut. Conversations restarted in forced whispers. My roommate Mason refused to meet my eyes. Even Tyler, who never missed a chance to tease me, suddenly found the floor fascinating. It felt like everyone on the team shared a secret that somehow belonged to me, yet I was the only person who had been locked out of it. I tugged the oversized hoodie tighter around myself, surprised by how strangely safe it made me feel. I couldn't explain why, and somehow that frightened me even more than the missing memories. As Logan disappeared down the hallway, only one thought kept repeating in my head. If the truth was so harmless, why wouldn't my captain tell me? Practice should have felt normal that afternoon, but every pass, every whistle, and every cheer from the empty bleachers carried an invisible weight I could not shake. Coach Ramirez acted as if nothing unusual had happened, running us through passing drills, defensive rotations, and conditioning until my legs burned. Yet the atmosphere around the team had changed. Whenever I drifted too far from the group, Logan's eyes found me almost instantly. He never said a word about it, but somehow he always knew exactly where I was on the field. During water breaks, he casually stepped between me and a crowd of students visiting the athletic complex. When a reporter asked if the captain and the rising midfielder had developed some secret training routine after the rivalry win, Logan simply smiled and changed the subject before I could answer. The strange part was that everyone accepted it without question. Mason finally sat beside me while we unlaced our cleats after practice. He stared into his sports drink for several seconds before speaking. "How is your head?" he asked quietly. "Fine, I guess." Why does everyone keep asking me that? He forced a smile that never reached his eyes. "Just making sure." "Making sure of what?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Forget it." Before I could press him further, Logan walked into the locker room carrying a clipboard from Coach. The conversations instantly shifted toward tomorrow's schedule. It was almost rehearsed. I watched him carefully this time. He was not controlling the room with loud commands or intimidating looks. The team simply followed his lead because they trusted him completely. That should have reassured me, but instead it made me wonder what kind of promise could silence an entire roster. As I packed my backpack, I noticed my own sweatshirt folded neatly inside, freshly washed even though I clearly remembered leaving it in my apartment 2 days earlier. Sitting on top of it was a small folded note written in careful block letters. Do not force yourself to remember before you are ready. There was no signature. I looked around the empty locker room, but only Logan remained, organizing practice equipment with the same steady focus he brought to every match. I walked over and held up the note. Was this you? He glanced at it for barely a second.
No.
His answer came so naturally that I almost believed him. Almost. Then who knows what happened that night? He rested both hands on the equipment cart and let out a slow breath. More people than you think. And nobody is going to tell me? His expression softened in a way I had never seen before. Someone will. He paused before adding, just not until you can hear the whole story instead of only the frightening parts. Those words stayed with me all evening. When I finally returned to my apartment, I emptied my backpack onto the kitchen table. My books slid across the surface, followed by my keys, my wallet, and something that definitely had not been there that morning. A silver whistle engraved with the Wolves logo and the number 10 caught the light from the window. It was mine, but I had lost it weeks ago. Wrapped around the whistle was a faded blue friendship bracelet with the initials E and L woven into the thread, and I had absolutely no memory of ever owning it. The bracelet stayed in my hand long after the sun disappeared beyond my apartment window. I turned it over again and again, tracing the blue threads with my thumb, hoping the memory would suddenly return. Nothing did. The initials woven into the faded fabric were impossible to ignore. E and L, Ethan and Logan. They could have belonged to anyone, yet deep down I already knew they did not. Sleep refused to come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, another tiny fragment drifted through my mind like a photograph carried by the wind. I heard distant laughter echoing across the athletic field. I smelled wet grass after a passing storm. I remembered someone placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder and telling me, just stay with me. The voice sounded familiar, but before I could recognize it, the memory vanished again. The next morning I arrived at the training facility earlier than usual. Logan was already there, running laps alone beneath the bright stadium lights. Even at 6:30 in the morning, he moved with effortless confidence, each stride measured and controlled. He noticed me standing by the fence and slowed to a walk. You are here early, he said with a small smile. I could not sleep, I admitted. I reached into my backpack and held up the bracelet. Do you recognize this? For the first time since all of this began, Logan's calm expression cracked. His eyes lingered on the bracelet for only a heartbeat before he quietly looked away. Where did you find it? Inside my backpack. He nodded once, almost to himself. Keep it somewhere safe. That is all you are going to say? He hesitated. It matters. Why? His answer came barely above a whisper. Because you once told me never to let you lose it. Before I could ask what he meant, Coach Ramirez's truck pulled into the parking lot, and the moment disappeared. Throughout practice, I could not stop watching Logan. Every movement, every decision, every quiet conversation with the coaching staff suddenly felt connected to a story I had somehow forgotten. After drills ended, Coach gathered everyone near midfield for announcements about the upcoming regional tournament. As the team started walking toward the locker room, one of the freshman players accidentally bumped into me, sending my notebook tumbling across the grass. Pages scattered in every direction. Logan reached one first. Before handing it back, his eyes froze on a folded photograph that had slipped from between the pages. It showed our entire team during preseason camp. Everyone was smiling toward the camera except Logan and me. We were standing off to the side, laughing at something outside the frame, and around my wrist was the exact same blue bracelet. Across the bottom of the picture, written in black marker and handwriting I immediately recognized as my own, were 7 simple words that made my heart race. If I forget, remind me after the championship. The words beneath the photograph followed me everywhere for the rest of the week. If I forget, remind me after the championship. I knew my own handwriting well enough to recognize every curve of every letter, but I could not remember writing the sentence or why I had chosen those exact words. The more I searched my memories, the more they slipped away, like trying to catch reflections on the surface of a lake. The regional tournament was only 4 days away, and campus had transformed into a sea of school colors. Students filled the walkways wearing Wolves jerseys, alumni banners appeared outside the athletic center, and reporters stopped players between classes looking for interviews. Everyone seemed excited except me. I felt as though I was carrying a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Logan remained exactly the same. He attended every practice, answered every question from the media with calm confidence, and encouraged the younger players without ever drawing attention to himself. Yet whenever our eyes met across the field, there was something unspoken between us, something that neither of us seemed willing to break. During Thursday's video session, Coach Ramirez reviewed footage from our previous victories. As the projector flickered against the meeting room wall, I noticed Logan quietly slide his laptop shut instead of following along. His attention was fixed on me rather than the screen. It was subtle enough that nobody else appeared to notice, but I did. The moment I looked back, he returned his focus to the presentation as though nothing had happened. After practice, I decided to stop waiting for answers to find me. I walked to the campus library and asked the student assistant if archived. Security footage from the athletic complex was available for academic projects. She apologized politely and explained that recordings were automatically deleted after a short period unless the athletic department requested them. My heart sank. Someone had already told me that more people knew the truth than I did. Now it seemed possible that someone had also made sure there would be nothing left to watch. As I stepped outside, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. There was no greeting, only a single sentence. Stop looking backward until after Saturday. Some memories protect themselves for a reason. Before I could reply, the number disappeared from my recent messages as though it had never existed. That evening, I returned to the stadium to clear my head. The stands were empty, the field lights casting long shadows across the grass. Near the center circle, I noticed Logan standing alone, holding a soccer ball beneath one arm. He looked toward the scoreboard instead of at me. Without turning around, he quietly said, "I knew you would come here." I stopped several feet away. "Was that message from you?" "No." His answer was immediate. "Then someone is watching me." He finally faced me, and for the first time since this began, genuine concern crossed his face. "That is exactly what I was afraid you would figure out before the tournament." Saturday arrived beneath a cloudless October sky, and the entire campus seemed to gather around Westbrook Stadium hours before kickoff. Blue and gold banners rippled above the entrance while families, students, and alumni filled the parking lots with excitement that was impossible to ignore. Normally, game day was my favorite part of the season. The energy, the anticipation, and the sound of the crowd always settled my nerves. This time, however, every familiar detail only reminded me that I was walking toward a truth everyone else seemed determined to protect. Coach Ramirez gathered us in the locker room before warm-ups and spoke about discipline, teamwork, and trusting one another when the pressure reached its highest point. As he finished, Logan stood beside him without saying a single word. He simply looked around the room until every player nodded. Whatever had happened before I lost my memories had not changed one thing. The team would follow him anywhere. During warm-ups, I could feel thousands of eyes following every touch of the ball. Reporters lined the sidelines, cameras flashed from the stands, and commentators discussed whether our captain could lead the Wolves to another regional title. I tried to focus on my footwork, but my attention kept drifting toward Logan. More than once, I caught him scanning the crowd instead of watching the field. It was subtle, almost impossible to notice, yet it happened often enough that I became certain he was searching for someone. Just before kickoff, the stadium announcer asked both captains to meet at midfield for the ceremonial coin toss. As Logan walked away, something small slipped from the pocket of his warm-up jacket without him noticing. I hurried over and picked it up. It was a plastic identification badge attached to a blue lanyard from the university security office. Across the front was a temporary visitor pass dated the exact night my memories disappeared. Before I had time to study it, Logan returned. The calm confidence he always carried vanished the instant he saw the badge in my hand. He took a slow breath and quietly said, "That should not be here. Why were you carrying a security pass from that night?" I asked. He reached for it but stopped halfway, lowering his hand instead. "Because I never meant for anyone to see it again." The referee called both captains back to midfield before I could ask another question. Logan tucked the badge into his jacket without another explanation and jogged away. I stood frozen near the bench, my thoughts racing faster than the cheers surrounding the stadium. If he had kept that badge hidden all this time, then he had been protecting more than a memory. He had been protecting evidence. And for the first time since waking up in his hoodie, a frightening possibility settled into my mind. What if Logan had not only hidden the truth from me? What if he had erased every path that could ever lead me back to it? The match unfolded in a blur of roaring fans, sharp passes, and relentless pressure, yet my mind never completely left the security badge hidden inside Logan's jacket. Every time our eyes met across the field, I searched for guilt. Instead, I found something that looked much heavier. It was not fear for himself. It was fear that I might discover something before I was ready to carry it. Midway through the second half, I intercepted a pass near midfield and pushed the ball toward our striker. The play ended with the winning goal, and the stadium exploded into celebration. Teammates rushed across the field, laughing, shouting, and embracing one another while blue and gold confetti drifted through the cool afternoon air. Logan was immediately surrounded by reporters asking about the victory, but instead of celebrating, he looked straight at me with visible relief, as though the final whistle meant far more than advancing to the next round. Hours later, after the interviews ended and most of the campus had emptied, I returned to the athletic building to collect a notebook I had forgotten in the video room. The hallway was unusually quiet. As I walked past Coach Ramirez's office, I heard familiar voices behind the partially open door. I recognized Coach first. "He is starting to remember." A long silence followed before Logan answered. "Only pieces. You cannot keep carrying this alone forever." "I know." "Then tell him." Logan's reply came so softly that I almost missed it. "If I tell him too early, he will blame himself." My heart pounded as I stood frozen outside the office. Coach sighed deeply. "He was never responsible. He will never believe that until he remembers the whole night." I stepped back before either of them noticed me and hurried outside into the cool evening air. My thoughts raced in every direction. Whatever had happened, Logan was not protecting himself. He was protecting me from something he believed I would unfairly carry as my own burden. Suddenly, the security badge, the missing footage, the anonymous message, and everyone's silence no longer fit the story I had built in my head. They pointed somewhere completely different. As I crossed the nearly empty parking lot, my phone vibrated once more. This time, the message came from Mason. "Meet me at the old practice field. There is something you deserve to have back." When I arrived, he was waiting beside the equipment shed with a small weathered storage box resting on the bench. He handed it to me without saying a word. Inside were several keepsakes from our freshman season, a ticket stub from our first championship, photographs of team dinners, and beneath everything else lay a folded letter sealed inside a clear plastic sleeve. Across the front, written unmistakably in my own handwriting, were the words, "Open only if I ever forget." My hands trembled as I broke the seal on the envelope. The paper inside had been folded so many times that the edges were beginning to soften, yet the handwriting remained unmistakably mine. "Ethan, if you are reading this, it means something happened exactly the way we feared it might. First, take a deep breath. You are safe. You are not alone. And whatever you cannot remember is not your fault." I stopped reading for a moment, my heartbeat echoing through the empty practice field. Every sentence felt like it had been written by a stranger who somehow understood me better than I understood myself. I continued, "Logan is going to blame himself. Do not let him. He made a promise to protect you, and he will keep that promise even if it costs him your trust for a while. If he refuses to answer your questions, it is because I asked him to wait. I stared at the page in disbelief. I had written those words before losing my memories. That meant I had known exactly what might happen. Mason quietly sat beside me on the old wooden bench, giving me enough space to finish reading. The next lines explained everything that my forgotten self had wanted me to understand. The night after the rivalry game, we had stayed behind at the stadium to organize equipment for the youth soccer clinic scheduled the following morning. A sudden electrical problem had caused part of the athletic building to lose power, leaving several hallways in complete darkness while campus security worked to restore it. During the confusion, I had become disoriented and accidentally fallen down a short concrete stairway near the storage area. According to the letter, I had struck my head and briefly lost consciousness. Logan had been the first person to reach me. He had called campus security, stayed beside me until medical staff arrived, and wrapped me in his hoodie because the October rain had soaked my clothes while we waited outside for the ambulance. There had been no hidden scandal, no betrayal, and no terrible secret waiting to destroy my life. The security badge belonged to the officer who had escorted Logan through restricted areas while emergency responders handled the situation. The missing camera footage had been removed only because the university automatically protected recordings connected to student medical incidents. The anonymous message had not been a threat at all. It had been sent by Coach Ramirez, who had promised to respect my written request until the championship was over. Tears blurred the final paragraph. Ethan, memory does not decide who loves you. If you forget every conversation, every laugh, and every promise, the people who truly care about you will still choose to stay. Logan already proved that once. Do not make him prove it twice. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the plastic sleeve as though it were the most valuable thing I had ever owned. The weight pressing against my chest for the past week did not disappear, but it finally changed. It was no longer fear. It was gratitude mixed with regret. I had spent days doubting the one person who had quietly carried the burden I had asked him to carry. The next afternoon, the team gathered for one final practice before the championship. The atmosphere was lighter than it had been in weeks. Players joked during stretches. Coach Ramirez smiled more than usual, and even the freshmen looked relaxed. Only Logan seemed distracted. Every few minutes he glanced toward me before looking away again, almost as though he was preparing himself for a conversation he was certain would end badly. When practice finished, I waited until everyone else had gone inside. Logan stayed behind to collect training cones scattered across the field. The autumn wind carried fallen leaves across the grass as the stadium slowly emptied around us. I walked toward him, holding the folded letter in one hand. He noticed it immediately. His shoulders stiffened. "Mason gave it to you," he said quietly. I nodded. "You knew about the letter. I promised I would never open it unless you asked me to." I looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "You kept every promise, did not you?" He lowered his eyes instead of answering. "I tried. Even when I accused you of hiding things. You had every reason to." I shook my head. "No. I only had half the story." Silence settled between us, peaceful instead of uncomfortable. The scoreboard above the empty stands clicked softly as it switched into its evening power-saving mode. Finally, Logan spoke again. "Do you remember everything now?" I smiled sadly. "Not everything." His expression fell just enough for me to notice. Then I failed. "No." I stepped closer and handed him the letter. "My memories are still incomplete, but this helped me understand something much more important." He looked at the envelope without taking it. "What is that?" I remembered the kind of person you are before I remembered the details. His eyes lifted to meet mine. For the first time since I had awakened with missing memories, the guarded look disappeared completely. "I was afraid you would only remember being frightened," he admitted. "I was frightened," I said honestly, "but never because of you." He laughed quietly, the tension leaving his shoulders all at once. "Coach is going to be relieved." "Coach already knew?" Logan smiled. "He has been waiting for this conversation almost as much as I have." As we began walking back toward the athletic building together, something unexpected happened. A faint memory returned without warning. It was not dramatic or overwhelming. I simply remembered standing beside Logan after our freshman championship, tying a blue friendship bracelet around his wrist while telling him, "No matter what happens, if one of us ever forgets, the other one remembers for both of us." I stopped walking and smiled. Logan noticed the expression immediately. "What is it?" I looked at him and quietly answered, "I finally remembered why we made the promise." Championship day arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze sweeping across Westbrook Stadium, the kind of perfect fall afternoon every athlete dreams about. More than 20,000 fans filled the stands, their cheers rolling across the field long before kickoff. As we stood in the tunnel waiting to walk onto the pitch, Coach Ramirez looked at each of us with quiet pride. "Trust your preparation. Trust your teammates. Most of all, trust each other." His words landed differently this time. I glanced beside me, where Logan stood wearing the captain's armband with the same calm confidence that had inspired this team for years. For the first time since waking up without part of my memories, I did not wonder what he was hiding. I simply felt grateful that he had never stopped believing in me while I struggled to believe in myself. The match demanded everything we had. Every run, every pass, and every defensive stop brought the crowd to its feet. Late in the second half, with the score tied, Logan intercepted a pass near midfield and looked directly at me. We did not need words. He sent the ball forward exactly where he knew I would be. Instinct took over. One touch, another step, and a clean strike sent the ball into the corner of the net. For a heartbeat, the stadium fell silent, and then the roar became almost impossible to describe. My teammates surrounded me, laughing and shouting as the scoreboard confirmed the goal that secured the championship. When the celebration finally settled, Coach called everyone together for one last team photo. As cameras flashed, Logan quietly removed the captain's armband and placed it in my hands. "You earned this long before today," he said. I stared at him in surprise. "I am not ready." He smiled the same reassuring smile that had followed me through every missing memory. "You said the exact same thing when we were freshmen." A few months later, spring arrived, bringing a new season and a new group of first-year players who looked just as nervous as I once had. Before our opening practice, one of the freshmen stood alone near the locker room, clutching his gear bag with uncertain eyes. Without thinking, I walked over, removed the familiar navy hoodie that had stayed folded in my locker ever since that unforgettable week, and draped it gently across his shoulders. He looked confused. "Are you sure?" he asked. I smiled. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness become the memories people keep forever. Across the room, Logan leaned against the doorway with his arms folded, watching quietly. Our eyes met, and neither of us needed to explain anything anymore. Some memories had returned. Others probably never would. But I finally understood that the strongest friendships are never measured by how much they remember. They are measured by who stays beside you while you find your way back. As we walked out onto the field together once again, the faded blue bracelet still rested around my wrist, and this time I remembered every reason I would never take it off.
The story of Ethan and Logan may have come to an end, but countless other stories are still unfolding around us, each becoming another colourful piece of life's beautiful mosaic. Should Logan have continued hiding the truth to protect Ethan? Or was honesty the better choice from the very beginning? Sometimes our silence comes from love, but even good intentions can create misunderstandings. Sometimes the smallest moments, a borrowed hoodie, a quiet act of kindness, or an unanswered question can change our lives forever. Never underestimate the power of honesty, trust, and open communication. The strongest relationships aren't built on perfect moments. They're built on the courage to be vulnerable and the willingness to understand each other. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with Blue Fox BL. We truly appreciate your support. If you're listening tonight, we wish you a peaceful night and a restful sleep. And if you're listening while working or going about your day, we wish you a wonderful day filled with happiness, success, and many good things ahead.